The forest around Ostra Luka stayed silent for only a few hours after Leonid Golikov fell. By dawn on January 25, 1943, the surviving partisans had slipped away, carrying what little remained of their ammunition and the memory of the boy who refused to drop his weapon even as the snow turned red around him. Word of his death reached the brigade headquarters within days and then spread like fire through every detachment operating in the Novgorod and Pskov regions. Commanders gathered their fighters under pine trees and read the report aloud. 16 years old, 78 confirmed personal kills, 27 operations, 14 bridges destroyed. One German Major General eliminated, along with his priceless documents, and now gone. Instead of breaking morale, the news hardened it. Fighters scratched his name into rifle stocks with bayonets, tied strips of red cloth to their grenade pins in his honor, and promised each other that the count would not stop at 78. The Germans thought they had killed the little devil. They soon learned they had only multiplied him. In the weeks that followed, ambushes became sharper and more frequent. A squad using the exact route Leonid had scouted months earlier hit a German supply column near Lake Ilmen in February. They waited until the truck slowed on the icy road, rolled grenades under the lead vehicle, then opened fire with captured MP-40s. 21 soldiers died in the first minute. The rest scattered into the woods where waiting snipers finished them. When the partisans searched the bodies, they found orders stamped with the same engineering unit insignia that appeared in von Wirtz's briefcase. Someone carved 79 into a nearby birch trunk. A March, the tally on that tree had reached 112. New teenagers joined the ranks, almost daily boys and girls who had lost parents to German reprisals, who had hidden in cellars while villages burned, who now carried the same quiet fury Leonid once carried. 13-year-old Misha Volkov from a hamlet near Dno found an abandoned F1 grenade in the snow near where Leonid's last battle happened. He carried it for weeks, sleeping with it under his coat, until his first raid in April when he threw it into a German guard post and killed 3 sentries. The detachment commander pinned a scrap of paper to Misha's tunic with the words for Lenya written in pencil. Misha never spoke much after that. He just kept throwing grenades. Spring 1943 brought melting snow and mud that bogged down German armor, but gave partisans perfect cover. The 4th Leningrad Brigade grew to over 3,000 fighters, many of them carrying photocopied sketches of Leonid's bridge demolition technique passed hand to hand like sacred texts. In May, a team of 8 teenagers, no one older than 17, crawled under barbed wire to the Dno-Pskov railway line at night. They placed charges exactly where Leonid's old note said the weakest points were, lit the fuses, and ran. The explosion derailed a train hauling 30 Panther tanks. The heavy vehicles sank into soft peat and stayed there for weeks until heavy cranes could reach them. German recovery crews found a small plywood tag nailed to one of the twisted rails, Leonid's old factory identification from Parfino. No one ever admitted planting it, but everyone smiled when they heard the story. The Germans responded with fury. They burned more forests, shot more hostages, offered bigger rewards. Flyers appeared in every village, 10,000. Reichsmarks for information leading to the capture of the Golikov gang, even though the boy himself was dead. The reward only made people angrier. Old women hid ammunition in bread ovens. Priests blessed satchel charges in church basements. Teenage girls etched tiny crosses and the initials LG into the wooden grips of pistols. In July, a 15-year-old courier named Katya Smornova slipped through 3 checkpoints using a forged pass with Leonid's photograph pasted over her own face. When an SS officer stared too long, she looked him straight in the eyes and said in broken German, "He is watching you." The man stepped back and waved her through. Katya delivered maps of German artillery positions to Soviet command. Shells landed on those coordinates 2 nights later. She returned to the forest with a new pistol and a single bullet engraved with the number 78. She used it on her next raid. Autumn rains turned roads into rivers of mud. Partisans dragged sledges loaded with captured radios, mortars, and cases of captured sausage through the downpour. One night near Staraya Russa, they ambushed a convoy carrying wounded officers back from the front. Grenades first, always grenades first. The way Lenya taught, then submachine guns. A staff car tried to reverse. Katya shot the driver through the windshield from 40 meters, then finished the major inside with a burst to the chest. 26 bodies lay in the mud by morning. The partisans loaded their own wounded onto the captured trucks and drove them to safety before German reinforcements arrived. Back at base, someone added the kills to the birch tally. Now 157. Winter returned colder than before. Snow piled higher than a man's head. Germans patrolled on skis, but partisans knew hidden trails across frozen swamps. In January 1944, a mixed group of veterans and new boys infiltrated a rear ammunition depot near Porkov. They moved in single file through knee-deep snow, placed thermite charges on fuel drums and artillery shells, then withdrew. The explosion lit the sky for miles. Secondary detonations continued until sunrise. Survivors who escaped the flames spoke of hearing a boy's voice laughing in the roar of the fire. No one laughed with them. By spring, the Red Army was pushing west fast. Partisans became pathfinders, guiding T-34 columns through minefields they themselves had mapped and cleared. In June, a 17-year-old named Vasily Kuznetsov, who had carried messages for Leonid in 1942, led the final assault on a heavily guarded bridge over the Luvat River. His team crawled forward under machine gun fire, planted satchel charges at the supports, and swam downstream as the bridge collapsed in a thunder of steel and water. The next morning, Soviet tanks rolled across the broken spans. Vasily pinned a faded ribbon to his coat, the same type awarded to Leonid posthumously, and said nothing. He did not need to. The bridge spoke for him. As the front advanced, some partisans returned to rebuilt villages to help with farms and schools. Others joined regular army units, carrying stories instead of rifles. Katya Smirnova became a sniper with the 2nd Shock Army. Her first kill was a German forward observer. Before pulling the trigger, she whispered, "For Lenya." The shot carried across the river, and partisans miles away smiled without knowing why. In liberated towns, children painted walls with pictures of a boy holding a grenade while giants fell around him. Teachers read his biography in every classroom. Small kids learned to count using his original 78 as the starting point. The war ended in Berlin in May 1945, but Leonid's shadow stretched further. Factories produced tractors named Golikov. The first one plowed fields that once hid his ambushes. Streets, schools, a warship in the Baltic Fleet carried his name. Veterans returned to Ostra Luka in 1950 and planted a birch over his grave. They left a single rusted grenade pin as tribute. Decades passed. Cosmonauts carried his photograph into space. Yuri Gagarin said the image reminded him why humanity reaches for stars so tyrants can never touch them again. In later years, the empire changed. Borders shifted, flags fell, but the story remained. Grandmothers showed scarred hands to grandchildren and said the boy taught them that fear can be heavier than any rifle. In quiet forests near Novgorod, birch trees still stand with old tallies carved deep into the bark. The numbers have weathered, but the message has not. 78 was only the beginning. Every act of defiance since then, every hidden message. Every quiet stand against injustice carries a piece of the 16-year-old who turned rage into legend. Leonid Golikov died in the snow, but the fire he started never went out. It burns wherever a young heart refuses to bow. The birch trees around Ostra Luka still carry those old carved tallies. Numbers weathered by 50 years of rain and frost. Yet the count never really stopped. Leonid Golikov's fire passed from hand to hand long after the last shot in Europe fell silent in May 1945, in the first post-war years, when villages rebuilt from charred timbers and people learned to sleep without listening for boots in the night. His name became part of everyday speech in the Novgorod region. Mothers told bedtime stories of the boy who threw grenades instead of fairy tales about bears. Fathers pointed to the forest edge and said Lenya walked there when sons asked where heroes come from. By 1947, the plywood factory in Parfino, where he once worked, installed a small plaque above the main gate. Leonid Golikov began here. He finished in the forest with 78 enemies. Workers touched it for luck before every shift. In Leningrad, renamed back to St. Petersburg decades later. The blockade survivors who received his wagon train supplies in 1942 named a school after him. Every graduating class still plants a tree in the courtyard on his birthday. June 17th. The tradition started in 1949 when the first post-war children walked through those doors, carrying bundles of saplings instead of ration cards. Across the Soviet Union, pioneer camps turned his raids into summer games. Boys and girls in red neckerchiefs played Golikov ambush, hiding in bushes with wooden rifles, shouting for the motherland. Before charging cardboard tanks, counselors awarded Lenya stars cut from tin cans to the stealthiest scouts. The game taught more than fun. It taught that one person, even small, can change the course of something much bigger. In the 1950s, when Reconstruction gave way to new factories and Sputnik soared overhead, Leonid's photograph traveled into space. Yuri Gagarin carried a tiny copy of the famous portrait, the serious-faced teenager with the submachine gun slung across his chest, sighed his Vostok capsule in Swastosa capsule in. After the flight, he told reporters the image reminded him why the Soviet people reached for the stars, so no invader could ever burn another village or kill another child. The quote appeared in newspapers from Moscow to Tashkent. Schoolchildren memorized it. In remote kolkhozes, farmers painted his silhouette on tractor hoods. The machines plowed fields that once hid partisan trails. A cruiser in the Baltic Fleet, launched in 1955, bore his full name, Leonid Alexandrovich Golikov. Sailors on watch at night sometimes claimed they heard a boy's voice in the wind across the deck, counting kills under the stars. The myth grew beyond borders. In Poland, underground fighters during the late 1940s printed leaflets with his story translated into Polish, urging young people to resist new forms of control the same way he resisted the swastika. In Czechoslovakia, after the 1968 Prague Spring, dissidents passed handwritten copies of his biography in secret. The 78 kills became a quiet symbol of what one determined teenager could cost an occupying power. Even in the West, during the Cold War, some history books included a paragraph about the Soviet boy Partisan, usually with a note of reluctant admiration for his courage. Back home, the 1970s and 1980s saw statues rise in small towns across Russia and Ukraine. In Skave bronze, Leonid stands forever 16, grenade in one hand, briefcase from von Wirtz in the other, eyes fixed on the horizon where the highway still runs. Tourists leave flowers. Local children leave small stones painted with the number 78. When the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, the monuments stayed. New flags flew, but no one tore his statue down. In the 1990s, when economic chaos hit hard, veterans gathered at Ostra Luka every January 24th to mark the day he fell. They brought vodka, bread, and stories. One old partisan, now stooped in gray, always told the same tale: how Leonid charged forward in the final minutes so others could escape. How his submachine gun kept firing even after he was hit. The listeners nodded, wiped eyes, and poured a shot into the snow for him. In the 2000s, digital archives began preserving what paper could not. Scanned documents from German war diaries mention Die Kleine Teufel repeatedly in 1942-43 dispatches from the Novgorod sector. Declassified Soviet files list every operation he joined, every bridge time-stamped, every truck destroyed. Historians cross-reference the numbers. The personal tally of 78 holds firm in primary sources. No exaggeration needed. In 2010, a popular video game set on the Eastern Front included a playable partisan character modeled after Hai Myung-face, PPSH-41, special ability to throw grenades with perfect accuracy. Players worldwide racked up virtual kills to unlock his medals. Forums filled with discussions: is Golikov based on a real guy? Answers linked to Wikipedia pages, grainy photos, monument selfies. Russian teenagers in the 2010s and 2020s discovered him through TikTok edits set to dramatic music clips of burning bridges, exploding trucks, a boy's face fading into snow. Comments poured in. He was my age. Respect. We need more like him today. During the 2020 pandemic, when schools moved online, teachers streamed documentaries about him. Students in distant cities, Lahore, Delhi, New York, watched the same footage of forests and graves, read the same numbers, felt the same quiet shock that a 16-year-old could become such a force. In 2025, as artificial intelligence reconstructed old photographs, one project colorized his portrait. Brown hair, clear eyes, faint freckles across the nose. The image went viral. People shared it with captions like "the face that scared an army." On January 24, 2026, exactly 83 years after his death, social media feeds filled with tributes. Veterans' grandchildren posted archive photos. History buffs shared maps of his raids. Young coders released open-source mods, letting players relive the Varnitsy ambush in virtual reality. In Novgorod itself, a small ceremony took place at the rebuilt village of Ostra Luka. A new generation planted another birch sapling over the old grave. They left no grenade pin this time, just a single sheet of paper with the number 78 written in fresh ink, folded and placed under a stone. Snow fell softly as they walked away. The forest stayed quiet. Yet, if you stand there long enough on a winter night, when the wind moves through the branches, you can almost hear it. The click of a grenade pin, the snap of a rifle bolt, a boy's steady breathing before the throw. The sound does not fade. It waits. It waits for the next teenager who sees injustice and refuses to look away. Leonid Golikov's 78 kills ended when a bullet found him in the snow, but the lesson he left never ended. One person, young, angry, determined, can cost an empire dearly. One ambush can delay a division. One stolen briefcase can change the war. One life lived fiercely in 16 short years, can echo for decades, centuries, maybe. His story is not frozen in 1943. It lives in every field to the stars above, from partisan forests to modern screens. Leonid Golikov remains proof. Rage, when it meets courage, becomes immortal. The count began at 0 in 1941. It reached 78 in 1943, and it has never truly stopped. Every stand against tyranny, every quiet act of defiance, every young heart that refuses to bow, adds one more. The forest remembers. The birch trees keep score. And somewhere, in the wind between the pines, a 16-year-old boy is still counting.